All right, so this is where we left off. We have a document that looks like this in HTML, really plain, and it is representing the document here that we created in HTML, and it represents the structure on the right here for the desktop layout, actually for all of the layouts, because for this page and for this page and for this page, they're all the same HTML structure. They're just going to get different styling based on the breakpoints. So we're going to come back here, and I already have a style sheet that's attached. I mentioned this before, and it's right here and it's empty. But before I continue further at all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste, so you don't have to watch me search for stuff. I'm going to paste my Google fonts that I'm going to use. I already have determined the ones that I want to use. I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and figure that out. The reason it's kind of nice to get an idea in advance of the typography that you're going to use is because different typefaces will take up different proportions, and they will really look different in terms of how you want to create your margins and stuff. So you could go through this whole exercise without doing the typography choices first and go back later and do it, but you might have to end up adjusting some of your margins depending on the type that you want to use and what kinds of proportions they have. So I'm going to end up using Muley and Open Sans, and I used some different sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and now it's going to allow me to add some styles with type, and I can start to see what it's going to look like. So I'm going to go over here in my styles, and so that you don't have to watch me type everything, I'm just going to paste some styles that I've already decided on, and I'm going to explain them. So I'm going to create something for the body that's going to affect the entire body, so I'll set the margins to 0 so I don't get that perimeter margin around it. And I'm going to go ahead and tell the background to be white, might as well. And for the font family, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use my Open Sans as the basic type. And if you remember from here, I used Open Sans in my Google fonts, and you can see that these are the, oops, let's try that again. These right here are the available sizes that I can use, or weights. So I'm going to use Open Sans, and then if that's not available for some reason off of Google's website, it'll choose Helvetica, which will only work on computers that have Helvetica, namely Macintosh computers. And then it'll go to Arial, which everyone has, and then if for whatever reason they don't have that, sans serif. Okay, so the font weight I've chosen is 300. So let's go ahead real quickly and let's check that out. And I'm going to grab this and I'm going to hit refresh. And then you can see that it is starting to at least give me the style that I'm looking for my font. Okay, so we'll move on to the next thing. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is look at this and say, all right, well, let's just start thinking about how we want the header and also the footer to look. So those are the first styles that I'm going to create. So let's go ahead here. Let's do the header. I'm going to go ahead down here and type in an empty thing for the footer. Okay, and so let's check out the header. Okay, so I'm just, again, going to paste some stuff and explain it. So I want to give the background sort of like a charcoal color, which is this color here. And the minimum height I want it to be is like 100 pixels. I'm just going to go ahead and determine that. The other thing I'm going to do too is where it says color, I'm going to make the color of the type to be white. Okay. And something else that I could also do, I'll show you in a minute though, is add some padding, but you'll see why in just a moment. So let's go ahead and then move to the footer. And I've just pasted this, and again we've got a background min height of 100 pixels, and I'm going to make the color for the footer this. Okay, and actually when I say color, again remember that's text. The background color is this. Let's go ahead and save that, and then we'll see how it looks. Hit refresh, and then now you see that the header's got a background color, and so does the footer. Okay, now the other thing too that you might notice is we've got this weird margin up here, and you might think, well, wait a second, we set the margins to be 0. Well, what's happening is that we've got some margins because of the unordered lists and as well as for the header, or excuse me, the heading level 1. So if we want to reset some of those things, we could go ahead and start to do that. So we could come up here and create a rule for the header H1, and then we can tell it to have a margin of let's say top and bottom 0, and then maybe let's say about 4% on the left and right, and we'll save that and we can do a test of that. Let's go back, hit refresh, and you see that it bumps it right back up then, and then we don't have that problem anymore. And you could also do the same for the bottom down here. We'll deal with some of that stuff in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this for the section. All right, so where we've got section, we have the padding on the top being 2% and the padding on the bottom being 2%, and that'll just give us a little bit of distance in between, and we'll just stick with that for right now. We're not going to deal with the side-to-side padding because we're going to have it go 100% of its available space, and then we'll deal with that with the articles. So let's just see if this changes anything too much. We'll hit refresh, and you see it just bumps it down a little bit. Not a big deal. Okay, and then next we're going to come down here and we're going to create something for the article. And again, I'm going to paste some stuff, and what I'm doing now is I'm creating something that has got a level of specificity. So I'm saying any article that is inside of the section whose class is equal to whole. So if we put section dot whole all run together, I can't do this now, right? That's not the same. That means that there's a whole class that's inside of the parent of section, where really, if you look at our HTML, let's scroll back to our HTML, you see that the section tag has the class of whole applied directly to it. All right, whole is not a descendant of section, it is applied directly to section. So in that case, we need to say section.whole, and then any article that's inside of that. So that means that any article inside of the section called whole. Okay, and what we're doing here is we're giving it this light gray background so it can differentiate itself, and then we're going to give it a minimum height. The reason I'm doing min height is because right now we don't have any content inside of them except for a little bit, and so I don't want them to all collapse terribly. I want them to actually have a little bit of heft to them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say for the width, we're going to say that that's 95%. Okay, that leaves 5% left over. And if you think of 5% left over, then you would divide that for the left and right by 2.5%. The other thing that you could do here is you could say automatic for these two. If you wanted to say auto and auto, you could do that, or we could just be explicit with the math. So what I'm doing for the margin then, since we know the width is 95%, we know that the parent is 100%, so that leaves 5% over, and we're saying we're going to give it a top margin of 2, a right margin of 2.5%, a 0 bottom margin, and a left margin of 2.5%. This part is actually a mistake where it says float left. If you wanted to take that out, you can taking it out. We're going to go ahead and hit save, and then over here we'll do a refresh, and then you'll see now that we've got a gray background for our article, and we'll deal with the margins for the type in just a moment. But let's just right now get the articles doing what we want them to do. Okay, so the next one is going to be to create the thirds class for the articles. All right, and we're going to go ahead and paste that again. So again, just like this one up here, we're doing every article that is inside of the section whose class is thirds. Okay, and again, we've got this background color, this light gray color. We have another minimum height of 150. All right, this time we're going to do our width is slightly different. The way I like to think of creating 3 columns is sort of like having an extra 4th column that you can divide up all of the gutters for. When I say gutters, I'm talking about these margins in between. So we have 3 columns, but we're not just dividing it by 3, which would be 33.33 and forever %. What we're doing really is sort of saying we're dividing it by 4, and we're taking that 4th column and we're creating all of the gutter space and margin space out of it. And that's an easier way for me to think about it. So if you take, let's grab our calculator. Let's say if we take 100, okay, and we're going to divide that by 4, then that should equal 25%, right? Well, you see over here I've got 28%. And the reason I did that was because at 25%, if I divide up that fourth extra column space by 6, and you might say, why am I dividing that by 6? Well, if you look over here at your desktop layout, your first column has a left side, so it has a left margin, and then it has a right margin, so that's 2. And then your middle column has a left and a right margin, that's 4. And then your left column has a left and a right margin, that's 6. So you might look at this and go, oh, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's not 4. It's going to be 6. So you have to consider all 6 margins here. All right, so if I divided 25 by 6, that's, pretty significant. That's over 4% of the screen for each margin, and that's a little bit too much, okay? So what I want to think about instead is I want to look at it as being about, let's say 28. So let's give about 3 extra percent to each one of these, and let's try that. So we say 28 times 3, that's 84. That means that 100% minus 84, that's 16 left over for your gutters and margins. So if we have 16, and now we divide that by 6, that ends up giving us 2.66 and so on percentages for each left and right margin, so that it will divide it up equally. And what's really important also to consider is that if you look over here, if you want this whole article to line up on the left side and on the right side with these articles, then the left margin has to be the same here as here. Now, 0.1% is not really going to make a visual difference on the screen. So this equation is approximate to this, and it's pretty darn close, and it'll work just fine. So if we stick with our calculation of doing 2.66 on the left and the right margin for each article, then we should end up with something that's going to work. So let me go ahead and save this, and let's take a look at the actual design here, and we'll hit refresh. And then you see what's happening here is we now have these articles floating as we told them to. And these are the footer articles that are showing up. Now you might look at this and go, well, what's going on here with this black bar? Well, if you look down here, we have, it's not exactly black, it's sort of that really dark charcoal color. That's where our footer is going. You might look at this and go, I don't understand why that's happening. It should be down here at the bottom. And also the articles are down here. Really confusing. Well, in the next demo, we're going to show you how to fix all of that, and we'll explain what's going on. So go ahead and end this demo and move to the next one.